Choose your world. Those words really struck a chord with me. But what is that supposed to mean in the context of chronic illness? Obviously, no one chooses the world of chronic illness. No one chooses to be sick, right? We all want our lives back. So what does this mean? It was in a recovery interview with Claudia, who recovered using the ANS Rewire program, where she brought up this concept of choosing your world. And so I felt it needed more discussion, because it is a concept that I see regularly. Here are a few snippets out of this podcast.
Yeah, it was a giant leap off of a cliff, and I didn't know if a net would appear. That was what it felt like. But I had to do it. I just felt this urge. I felt this need to just try. I knew I had to try. And in order to put 100% into this recovery, I knew I had to sever that connection. So I did. Healthy people can never relate to our experience, no matter how hard they try or how much they love you. They just can't. So I felt like I lost that a little bit. I felt like I may have lost the ability to step back in for sure, because the whole idea of what I was doing was so controversial.
But when we're talking about visualization, we're talking about imagining moving your arms. And that doesn't mean that you look at your arms, but there's a feeling. Obviously, when you move your fingers, there's a feeling. And they looked at one study where you literally imagine engaging the fingers. So it's different than seeing the fingers move. It's a kinesthetic thing. And they looked at the areas in the brain on these functional MRIs that showed that there was a difference and how it corresponds to actual movement. So I hope you found that interesting, intriguing, and I look forward to your comments at the end of this podcast. Let's get into it. Just a short but important message regarding the content of this podcast. The ideas, concepts, and opinions expressed in this recording, website, and associated media and products are intended to be used for educational and information purposes only. Nothing presented is intended to replace your physician, nor are they a substitute for medical diagnosis, advice, or treatment. This podcast is provided with the understanding that the authors, guests, speakers, and publishers are not rendering medical advice of any kind. Today's podcast is about choosing your world. I've been doing recovery interviews for many years now. At the time of recording, it's probably about 7 or 8 years, I think. And as part of doing recovery interviews with people with ME, CFS, fibromyalgia, POTS, and multiple chemical sensitivities, I have many interviews where I have moments. And I remember these distinct moments from many of these interviews that I've done where something important has come up, something interesting and something that feels special. And one of these interviews happened a few years ago with Claudia. If you've been listening to the podcast, you'd know Claudia is a regular guest. And that was when she talked about choosing her world. And hence, that's the topic of our talk today. And I would like to welcome Claudia back to the podcast. How are you doing, Claudia?
I'm doing well, Dan. How are you today?
Good. I know this is, when I mentioned it to you, it was kind of dear to your heart. You were quite excited about it because it meant a lot to you, that whole topic, didn't it?
Yeah, it was a very powerful notion for me. And somehow intuitively, I just knew that this was a key to me recovering, or at that time, attempting to recover.
Well, I have to admit, it has been on my mind, and I have been thinking about it quite a bit because it's something I see regular with people, this issue coming up.
So why do you think it matters? Why is it important in the recovery process?
Well, look, I think the first thing is, and obviously many people at this stage will probably be listening going, well, what are we talking about? Because they may not have heard your interview, and I will link the interview in the show notes. But I guess, for one, our focus determines what we see in terms of opportunities to take action. And our focus also determines what actions we take, and also what distractions we experience. So from a simple practical point of view of engaging in the recovery process, or engaging in anything in life, I think focus is very important. And I think that's a big component of this choosing your world concept. The other thing is, there's probably multiple layers to this, and I think you will probably talk about some of your own layers when I ask you about this shortly, but there's also the physiological effects. So we're talking the direct impacts on our health, and I think there needs a bit of context here. We've got to make it clear that, of course, we all know this is a real physical illness, and you can't just do positive thinking and make it magically go away. Choose your will to be healthy and it'll be gone. I mean, I think everyone would have worked that one out by now, right?
Yeah.
However, it is because these illnesses, ME, CFS, fibromyalgia, POTS, multiple chemical sensitivities, because we're talking about a neurological illness, the impacts of these, let's call it mental imagery, mental focus, become very real. And if you reflect on our talk on neuroplasticity, focus became an important element. So I think it's two-layer. It's practical in terms of what we do, and secondly, it does have some direct physiological consequences. And I'll share some of the research on that afterwards.
Great. Excellent.
But I mean, let's start with, why did this come to you? Because I think from memory, and correct me if I'm wrong here, because as you know, in the program, I talk about making a shift away from the illness world. Mm-hmm. I talk about changing your environment, changing reminders, changing your Facebook, changing everything. But I think you actually made this change before you came to that lesson. Is that right? Mm-hmm.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. So what motivated you?
So as you know, and anyone who's listening who has watched or listened to my recovery video will know, I was deeply involved in the advocacy community. And so on a daily basis, I was immersed in that work, but I was also in conversation with other people who were sick with ME, CFS, fibromyalgia, POTS, etc. And so that became my world. And then I had a secondary world with healthy people. And so I always felt this split, like there was a division in my psyche, that I was divided. And I really didn't feel like I had a definition of who I was anymore. And that didn't feel good. And so I felt like I really needed to redefine myself. Who am I? What am I? And where do I want to go? Right? And then I felt like being part of the advocacy community, on the one hand, gave me purpose, and purpose is positive and good. But on the other hand, it also felt like I was being sucked into this vortex of illness all the time. And I could feel that it wasn't healthy for me. Just always ruminating on the illness and the fact that there was no cure, and what does my future look like? And it was very depressing, honestly. And I was getting to the point where I felt like I couldn't sustain that anymore. So I needed to pull away from that, and I wanted to pull away from just connections with other sick people. I wanted to communicate with healthy people, just to feel that other sense of connection with the other side of my own self. Mm. And then when I did contemplate doing the recovery program, I realized it became even more important, that I really needed to shift at that point.
Okay, so it kind of coincided with your decision to enroll in the program?
Yes, I believe it was kind of a predecessor to the decision. And then when I did finally decide, yes, I'm going to do this program, before I committed to the program, I made sure that I had made the division, the split already.
Okay, so, but if you're leaving the sick world, as you call it, I mean, you're not in a healthy world, right?
No.
So, and you're talking about connecting with people who want to do stuff. I mean, that's kind of depressing. I mean, you're talking about how it's depressing to focus on the illness, but if you hang out with people who are really well and have the goals and aspirations, I mean, these are things that are taken away from us. And I remember it always used to feel, I don't know, it felt depressing in the sense that I felt, pushed down. Because these are the things that I felt weren't available to me. Being around people with their big goals and stuff. And my goal is like to get out of bed tomorrow, It's
Right.
like...
Yeah. Well, and for myself, I was surrounded by competitive athletes. My husband, my daughter, my entire friend base, all of them are Ironmen and whatever, right? So that was my environment. And so, yes, it felt like I was constantly beaten up by the fact that I couldn't participate or, do those things. But I think I also realized that focusing on the ill community was a detriment in its own way. And so I needed to pull away from that. What I was going to fill it with, I wasn't sure at that point. I just needed to pull away from that. And then at that same time, I was making this decision to do your recovery program, the ANS Rewire program. And that's when I realized, okay, if I pull away from that community, then I can associate with healthy people with the idea that at some point, maybe I will be able to meld in with them at some level. Of course, at that point, I was not secure in the idea that I was going to recover at all. I was extremely skeptical. I thought improvement.
Right.
So, yeah.
I mean, that's kind of a big step to take on the notion of what probably at the time felt like a bit of a pipe dream. And so if you recognize, look, I got to just say how it is. I mean, like, I think many of us, when we're ill a long time, we just don't think it's going to happen. And so if that's your view, you're going to be still a sick person, but you're going to lose that whole connection. Then what you're left with is nothing. I mean, this doesn't sound like...
Yeah, it was a giant leap off of a cliff, and I didn't know if a net would appear. That was what it felt like. But I had to do it. I just felt this urge. I felt this need to just try. I knew I had to try. And in order to put 100% into this recovery, I knew I had to sever that connection. So I did.
What did you feel you lost when you severed that connection?
I felt like I lost this connection with other people who could relate, this relatable community, right? Because healthy people can never relate to our experience, no matter how hard they try or how much they love you. They just can't. So I felt like I lost that a little bit. I felt like I may have lost the ability to step back in for sure, because the whole idea of what I was doing was so controversial. And I had built that community up, my Facebook group, right? I had built that from the ground up, and so it was extremely important. I also was concerned about what would happen to it if I stepped away. Is it going to keep going? Are people who depended on that, what are they going to do if I'm not there? But thankfully, the people who stepped in did an excellent job of continuing that. It still goes on. So, but those were my concerns at the time.
How many years had you been building that Facebook group?
About 7 or 8 years, probably.
Wow.
Yeah.
And there were thousands of people in there, right?
Yeah. So it was a long time. It was a lot of work. But I've been, my whole adult life, I've been good with changing what I do. I mean, I've had several careers. I've changed a lot. I embrace change. And so maybe that was a personality characteristic that helped me jump off the cliff. I don't know. I felt like there was a reason that I had to do it. I can't put a finger on it, really.
Yeah, very interesting. And, I see this comes up a lot. I didn't have an illness community. I didn't know anyone else with the illness. I remember reading an article by Court Johnson of Health Rising.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking for symptoms, this and that, and the CFS diagnosis that, I don't know. I was still skeptical, and because it sounded like, no, I've got something really wrong with me. I must have a virus, something like this. And then I came across an article where he described his life in great detail. I don't remember where it was. Somewhere on the internet, and I didn't know who he was, but I just came across this article, and I remember being just completely. It was like at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh gosh!
I hadn't been sleeping actually. What it's like, and you have these moments of desperation. You think you're going to find something, and
right.
And I'm looking, and I thought, well, maybe I'll have a look at the CFS thing, and I found this article. And he described his experience in great detail, and
it's emotional. Like that connection when you first experience that someone else is actually living through what you're living through, and you think you're the only person in the entire world that's having this. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's interesting how this emotion came up. Now I guess I've never really spoken about it myself. I was never part of. I never really had this experience. It was just on my own, and I saw this article, and it's like, oh my God, this is me. The detail of his experiences and the symptoms, and you go through years where people just don't understand you.
Yeah.
And everyone rolls their eyes, and you think you must be crazy. How can anyone have so many different weird symptoms?
Yeah.
And then you read something or meet someone, and it's the same. You're like, oh my goodness, I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
And that was really my experience. And it was only after I. Actually, it was before I started writing the book. It was when I had formed my hypothesis for the pathogenesis of the illness and I started recovering that suddenly I met all these people with CFS. It was really weird. I hadn't met anyone in 7 years and 6 years at the time. And then I remember in 1 month I met 4 or 5 people. It was so weird.
Oh my gosh.
Choosing your world, maybe. I don't know what that is.
Well, there you go, right?
Well, I don't know. I can't explain that. It was very odd. And interesting, I remember distinctly talking with one lady, and she was the same. She, I told her about this possibility of recovery and all this, and she was like, oh my God. And she grabbed me and she ran me out to the car and grabbed the phone and called her mama.
Oh my God.
She goes, here's this guy, he's exactly, and talk to him. And I thought she was excited about this idea of recovering and the possibility. I mean, I wasn't really fully convinced, but I had made tremendous progress at this stage. But for her, it was actually just about the fact that she put me on the phone. She's like, go on, talk to him. It's like she wanted me to explain to him that she wasn't crazy. There's someone else who has all these symptoms.
Oh my gosh. Just relate to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was so shocked that the whole message that I was trying to give her that, I think I'm getting better. And I think there's a way to recover.
Right.
She
no interest, lost.
Didn't hear it. It was completely lost. All she wanted to go is, see, look, I'm not crazy.
Oh, gosh.
So I can only imagine what it must be like to be actually connected to a community like that. And then to let go of that. I see that many people really struggle with that.
Mm. Yeah. I think for me, I felt like I was in a train to nowhere with advocacy. The deeper I got into it, the more I realized the same actions were happening decade after decade after decade. We were saying the same words. We were writing the same papers, going to the same meetings. Nothing was changing. And that was so frustrating to me. And so I think that played a role in my decision to leave it as well. I felt like I could do more good by working with patients, by helping other people be positive and find other parts of life where they could find joy, just helping people with coping mechanisms. I felt like that was a better use of my time and energy than what was happening in advocacy. So there were multiple reasons why I felt this need to walk away from that. Yeah.
And I guess it coincided with your shift to do this recovery program.
Mm-hmm.
And did you feel it had other impacts leaving this world, choosing the well world? I mean, dynamically in your everyday life or in your recovery focus, I mean, how else did it impact you?
Definitely did. It definitely did, because associating with sick people all the time, I think internally I thought about being sick all the time, and that was not healthy for me. And so shifting away from that gave me space. I opened up, and I was meditating at the time as well. And I could feel it. I could feel this change, this spaciousness in me opening up that had been filled with illness thoughts, illness focus. And so it helped me move away from that a little bit. I could go outside and focus on nature more clearly and do the dishes or eat a meal without thinking symptom checking or body scanning. And, I was just overwhelmed with that before.
It is, because, the illness becomes kind of all-encompassing. It's like our life shrinks and our focus on the illness grows until there's nothing left except the illness. Right? The little circle of illness grows, the outer circle of your whole life shrinks, and then there's nothing else left.
Yeah.
And because being ill affects every area of your life.
Right.
And your ability to do anything. I mean, how are you going to have... And it's easy to become a bit cynical and say, well, how am I going to focus on something else? Like, what am I going to focus on?
Right.
Like, what? I'm going to focus on my triathlons?
Right.
So I'm going to focus on my great social things. But the truth is, there are other things to focus on. And the problem is that when the illness focus becomes so big, we don't see those opportunities.
Right.
Because there's only so much space in our head, right? Even without brain fog, right?
Yeah.
There's only so much things that occupy our focus, our energy, our attention. And I think this applies not just to illness, but also to recovery.
Mm-hmm.
So for people who are in the program, I wanted you to recognize that this is one of the reasons why I have 2-year access. I mean, besides not being able to promise someone lifetime access, because what happens if we get hit by a meteor in Australia? Who's going to... I mean, my program will run for a while, and I can guarantee 2 years, but who knows?
Right.
But really, it's also about the fact that there comes a point where when people are in the later stages of recovery, I want them to move away from recovering.
Right.
Because this focus on recovery, it's really kind of the same as the focus on illness.
Yeah, it is.
You need to just connect to just being a well person. Once you're 80, 90%,
right,
just forget about not just the illness, but forget about getting well. Just focus on your life.
Right. I remember you saying that to me. Go live your life. Go live your life. Yeah.
And you talked about doing something like this, like some advocacy, positive advocacy again, and being involved, and there you are. But at the time, I think it was at least 2 years, I kept fobbing you off because I was like, I don't think it might be nice for me or to help other people or something like this. But I thought, no, for you, this is not good.
And that was the best thing you could have ever said to me, because I needed those 2 years to move away and just engage in life again. Yeah.
It's about building that connection and confidence as being a well person. Because at first, even if we are well, we don't necessarily associate with that identity. Yeah. Would you say?
Oh, definitely. And for myself, my recovery on the physical level was so fast. It was 3 months in the program, right?
Yeah.
My brain did not have time to catch up. I was in shock and awe that this had happened. I couldn't grasp what had occurred. I would say it took almost a year, maybe even longer, before I could actually really say the words, I am recovered. That was difficult.
Do you know, that's interesting that you say that, because I've seen other people have these, I call them miracle cures, right? But the people have the very fast recoveries with the program, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. And and many of them feel quite uncomfortable because all kinds of stuff comes up. They feel uncomfortable. It's a bit like post-COVID, suddenly you have to go out and be in restaurants again and meet with people, and people feel uncomfortable. Yeah. It's a bit like that when you recover. And if it happens very quickly, you don't have any time to adjust or mentally. But, I took longer to recover because, of course, I didn't have all the resources that you had.
Right.
And it took me 18 months to recover. And many people take longer, also in the program. Yeah. 12 months or 18 months. Or however long, right? And yet, once I was well, even after a period of 18 months, it still probably took me another year, or maybe, to be honest, for me, maybe even longer. Because even though I wasn't ill as long as you were, I don't know. I mean, I know you didn't think recovery was possible.
Yeah.
But I was so militant about this conclusion, and I just I stopped even trying or looking for things.
Wow.
And so, because it just didn't go anywhere.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I think it took me maybe 1 or maybe even 2 years to actually connect with that new version of myself.
Yeah. Well, and I was thinking also another thing that occurred when I was making that shift, and it has to do with identity. So while I was sick, I had the identity of an ill person, minus everything else that created Claudia, right? All those other things were stripped away. So I felt this emptiness, this void, all the limitations. And so when I was going through this idea of, I need to make this shift, I need to move away from the illness community and the advocacy community, at the same time I was thinking, who am I? What is deep down inside Claudia that remains? What's still there? There has to be some core little seed left, right? And so that was something I did in my meditations. What's in there? What's in there? And I started remembering things, beliefs, values, just notions. I can't even put a word to them. Just me, my core true self from when I was a little girl. It started welling up, and I felt like, okay, I can latch onto that. That's still there, right?
Well, it's amazing how you did this before you recovered. I mean, it took me a long time to after. I mean, when you said, blah, 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 what was left inside me, the only words that came to my mind was bitter and twisted. Because that's pretty much how I felt. So it's interesting. But look, I just want to point out too that when you remove that focus and get rid of that illness world, you got this empty space. And you need to fill it with something. And whilst so many things are not available to you whilst you're chronically ill, when you make the space, you will have to find something.
Right.
And some people just find negative thoughts and feel depressed. But if you make the choice to say, hey, I'm going to find something positive, I'm going to find something I can enjoy, something I can get a little bit passionate about, something that when I go to lie down at night, I can go to that happy place. Right. And it may not be a sport, but it may be some other pastime. It could be photography of animals or something, some kind of activity that you can do with your level of wellness.
Right.
And it may be something that you reconnect to from your childhood or early in life, or it may be something completely new. But I really say it's so important that you focus on when you choose your world,
right,
that you fill that new world with something.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do that, you probably fill it with some other kind of misery.
Right. And nature was a big thing for me at that time because I physically couldn't do a lot.
Yes.
So I just started taking a camera outside in my yard, and I started taking pictures of things, leaves, birds, right? Whatever passed in front of me, because I couldn't really move around. And I got lost in it. And rather than being inside myself and thinking about my symptoms and scanning my body, suddenly I was inside a flower, and I would get lost in a flower for 30 minutes. And it was very meditative. So that was part of that process for me as well.
Yeah, awesome. Let's and look, I just want to point out this whole thing about our focus. It's, I don't know if I'm sure you've experienced this to anyone who's listening. Whereas maybe one day you were looking at buying a car, or a friend buys a car, and it's this car model, and you go, "Wow, what is this? Like, I've never seen this in my life. This is like weird. It's just like," he goes, no, that's been around for years. And you're like, really? I've never seen this car. And immediately afterwards, you see this car everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
And you're like, how could I not ever have seen this car? Now, it's literally everywhere.
Yeah.
And this is what happens when we focus on something, right? And it's the same with illness. You focus on illness, suddenly you see it everywhere. It's more to, your brain has to prioritize. There's lots of things going in, right? We call these things filters. When people talk about in neurology or psychology, they talk about filtering things, all right? Because there's all this information coming into your brain, and to filter most of it out, and there's little specks that your brain thinks are important, so it'll focus on those. And so, when we focus on where we want to go, not only do we see things, but actually we see the opportunity for things.
Right.
So we this is something maybe I could do to help me get better. And this is an activity I might be able to do that I could enjoy. Whereas before, we're so closed off to that, it's like in one ear and out the other, because you automatically dismiss that you can't do anything, or you don't even hear it.
Right. Yeah.
You don't even hear it.
Yeah.
So look, there's also I spoke a little bit about the physiological effects. And it's interesting, there has been some research, and I'll link to some of these interesting papers in the show notes.
Great.
There's lots of papers. If you do a good search, you can get quite involved. One of the interesting things is that for many years now, they've looked at, for instance, stroke rehabilitation. And they've looked at the impact of imagining that we are doing something physiological.
Right.
Like being able to walk normally when you're limping, or something like this. And there's been a lot of interest. And then it's not all definitive.
Right.
Right? I mean, you might grab a piece of research that will say, oh, yeah, look, this works. And then you look at other pieces of research that say, well, this needs more investigation. You know, is this something that does help? But actually, there's one noted study that I saw that really focused on, it really looked into, well, what is the difference? Why do some people benefit more from these visualizations? And what it really seems to come down to is this whole idea of focus. Right? And you probably remember me saying how essential it is for neuroplasticity that we have a strong focus. So when we are in our studies, I mean, it talked about whether people are even able to imagine things. I mean, if I were to say to you, can you just bring up an image now? And I want you to vividly bring up an image of an animal, specifically a Tasmanian devil.
A what? I'm not familiar. No, I'm not familiar with what that looks like. So no, I can't. I'm not capable.
Right. And then so when we're not capable of doing it, that's going to someone who's not capable is going to have a different possibility and a different outcome. And it's not just whether you know about something, because obviously most people, not all people, but most people would know about the things that they're trying to achieve, right? Because they probably were in a previous time where they were able to do that.
Right.
But not everyone can visualize the same way.
Right. Yeah. And
some of the visualizations in the research are not actually about visualizing in the sense of seeing it.
Right.
and practicing those mental exercises, but actually by visualizing doing it.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like wearing Google lenses, like in a digital game, right?
That's exactly right.
You're looking out of your eyes, seeing your own body maneuvering and doing the action.
Yeah, well, actually, that's a very interesting thing to say, because in some of the studies, they have actually used virtual reality
Mm-hmm.
to help foster this idea of helping people visualize, and they found that it actually improved their ability
Mm-hmm.
to train the nervous system and affect neuroplasticity so that they could improve their walking or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it was. But when we're talking about visualization, we're talking about imagining moving your arms. And that doesn't mean that you look at your arms, but there's a feeling. Obviously, when you move your fingers, there's a feeling. And they looked at one study where you literally imagine engaging the fingers. So it's a different than seeing the fingers move.
Right.
It's a kinesthetic thing.
Right.
And they looked at the areas in the brain on these functional MRIs that showed that there was a difference and how it corresponds to actual movement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's all kinds of evidence out there that shows when we're seeking to affect neuroplasticity that these visualizations actually directly impact
Right.
the nervous system.
And that all came up in my recent training in hypnotherapy too. And the
Mm-hmm.
importance of trying to engage a person's perceptions, all of the perceptions, visual, the smell, the sense of smell, the sense of touch. You have to engage all of them because you don't know what type of learner a person is, and that will affect how they can imagine something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So now, obviously, in relation to the focus on neuroplasticity in the ANS Rewire program, for people listening to that would suddenly make a whole lot more sense why we need to choose our world,
Mm-hmm.
and why I talk about this shift in identity. Because the shift in identity, we talk about physiological and psychological, physical, all kinds of strategies to help us coax and train the nervous system to behave normally,
Mm-hmm.
so that it doesn't create these symptoms anymore. And this is really just another way to train a nervous system is to have that imagination and feeling, association, if you like. And this is where I think sometimes people get slowed down a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
because we get so anchored in that illness identity because, well, we're ill.
Right.
It's not like it's imagined, right?
Right.
It's like
This is real.
It's an identity because it makes sense, right? That's how it is. And so shifting from that is really important as we recover. And if you could do it before you recover, I mean, that could be extremely helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, you talked about people getting hung up at this stage, and I've had people mention that to me, that they feel this conflict when they're trying to visualize being healthy or imagine, right, creating that imagery. They feel like they're lying to themselves, and then they get caught up in that. It's not true, but I have to try, right? What would you say to someone who's facing that right now?
Well, the first thing I would say is you're right. You are lying to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But let's take a step back from what we're doing here. I mean, the purpose of this is try and help you move forward.
Right.
Like we talked, there's these two layers. There's the neurological rehabilitation, and then there's also the, whatever you focus in life, you can move towards more easily. And I'm not trying to fluff that up from a, some sort of, metaphysical point of view. I'm just saying there's this absolute reality that what I focus on, I will be able to move towards more effectively. I will see opportunities that present themselves. I'll be able to take action.
Right.
And they will just pass you by. Lots of little times. And the little actions and the little adjustments in your life perhaps are even more powerful than the big things that we do, because there's so many of them. They're pervasive. So, yes, it is true that we are lying to ourselves, but remember, most of us lie to ourselves most of our lives.
Right.
Seriously, just look at your friends, look at your family, and how many of them are delusional.
Right.
Right? I'm the smartest, I'm the stupidest, I'm the prettiest, I'm the ugliest, I'm this, I'm that, I'm the best,
Right.
I'm the worst.
Yeah.
This is not based in reality.
Right. Most of the thoughts that pop into our heads are not real.
They're not real.
Yeah.
People have all kinds of way that they have images of themselves in relation to the rest of the world. And, let's face it, we question these quite strongly.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that these are not true
Right.
with most people. And yet they latch onto them. So chances are you're already lying to yourself. If you're going to keep lying, you might as well do it for something useful.
Well, and now on the other side of all of this, I have more knowledge through this training I've gone through with hypnotherapy. I understand how the subconscious mind works, and I understand that it's not temporal. It doesn't understand time. So when you want to create an intention that you want to plant into the subconscious mind, you want to do it as if it's already happened. This is a very
Absolutely.
valuable thing if you're going through recovery, right? You want to make the statement as though it's already occurred and in the positive. I am a healthy person. I am capable of walking to the mailbox. Statements like just small things. I am capable of getting up off the couch and getting my breakfast. Very, very small steps.
Absolutely, because this is common in psychology and hypnotherapy, right?
Yeah.
Because when you're there, because of what we said, it moves you towards that. It
Right.
brings your body into the state, and you will take advantage of all the opportunities to bring that about, because it is incongruent.
Right.
Right? You're bringing into your mind that, I'm let's say I'm not a smoker. I'm not a smoker. Bang! It's in, and then you got to pick up a cigarette, and it's like,
wait a minute.
this doesn't fit,
Right.
and the brain doesn't like when things don't fit.
Exactly.
So, but it's a lie to
Yeah.
say you're not a smoker because you just had a smoke 2 hours ago, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, it's incongruent, and this incongruence needs to be resolved.
Right.
And by continuously to be incongruent, if you focus on what you want your outcome to be, the behavior, like with something like smoking, or the behavior of the nervous system, has to adjust.
Right. And that's when you build
Right.
a new groove, right?
That's when you build a new groove. Now, it's not as simple as simply saying, I'm going to positive visualize and positive think, and
Right.
therefore I'm just going to build a new groove.
Right.
Because the illness is complex. There's all kinds of physiological and perhaps even psychological
Right.
things going on in your life that trigger your nervous system. So, I like I said, positive thinking alone is probably not going to do it.
Right.
But given the fact that we're talking about how useful this is in a stroke rehabilitation or somebody with other physical disabilities,
Right.
right? I mean, clearly, we can see that there's real science behind this.
Right.
This isn't just wishful thinking.
And it's a piece of the puzzle, like every other piece you've talked about.
Piece of the puzzle.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
And more so than it's just helping you, not doing it may be holding you back.
Yeah, good point.
That's really been the biggest effect that I've seen. I mean, it's difficult, unless we do a proper scientific study. You can't say, well, how much is it going to help you?
Right.
But I can't say.
Right.
I can't say. I suspect it does have a significant impact, because it fits with everything else we do in the program, right?
Right.
But I can definitely say that holds people back.
Yeah.
So I think before we finish up today, I think this question you asked probably needs to be explored a little bit. Yeah. Why? What do we say to people when you feel like, it's a lie? Ask yourself, what else is it that holds us back from making that shift?
Right.
I think a lot of it has to do with fear of a lack of confidence and a fear that we're going to be almost abandoned.
Oh, yeah.
Because you've got this connection with people, you've got this
Right.
social connection, you've got all of this.
You've defined yourself. You've defined yourself this way. This is your definition of me.
Yeah, it's your life.
Yeah.
So if you lose this,
Then what?
yeah,
And that's was my description of jumping off the cliff without the net. who am I going to be when I jump off? I don't know.
So what do you think is key to help people let go of this other world and to shift into it? I mean, and I don't want to take away from the power of simply just do it.
Right.
Sometimes there is really no other way than to take that leap.
Yeah.
But if we can recognize maybe some of the things that are holding us back, how do you think we might be able to make that transition easier?
You mentioned the word fear, and I think a lot of obstacles and blocks that come up during recovery, I consider those resistance. When I was going through that process, I recognize that's resistance. That's based in fear. What am I afraid of? So there's a lot of digging down that has to occur. There's a lot of honesty with oneself that has to occur. And those, to me, were the most difficult parts of recovery. Really drudging through that mud and being honest with myself about the truths that were there. And then leaning into them, right? You have to lean into that and not push it down anymore.
Yeah, see how it feels.
Yeah.
I think this is really a great point you're making. And in the coaching that I do, this comes up where I talk about the fact that when we talk about any sort of behavior, let's say we have a behavior we think maybe unhelpful. Mm-hmm. And I say, if you didn't do that behavior, what would be the problem with that?
Right. What would you be without it?
Yeah. How would that feel?
Mm-hmm.
Because often you find, because we don't do stuff for no reason.
Right.
So if you're doing something, you might say, it's not helpful, I shouldn't really do this. And then you might, because it's an unhelpful behavior, you will often moderate that behavior with discipline, you know. But discipline is weak.
Right.
People think, discipline. All the top athletes discipline. Top athletes don't have discipline.
Right.
Well, very few. Agassi is probably one of the few I can think that actually had discipline.
Yeah.
Most of the others, they love playing tennis.
Right. Right.
Right. They do it because they want to become a champion. They want to do this. You know, they don't hate what they're doing. Right. And so, yeah. So when we go to do something, there is a payoff. Mm-hmm. Or sometimes there is a big pain associated if we don't get that payoff.
Right.
So asking the question, what's the problem with that? What's the problem? And like you say, it comes up. Mm-hmm. You've got to become self-aware, come up, be honest about it comes up, and then you go, okay, well, is there another way of dealing with this problem?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the hard stuff.
It is hard, especially when you feel vulnerable and diminished.
Right, very diminished.
With chronic illness. And you say, I feel lonely. You go, well, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And we don't want you to feel lonely, right?
Right.
Then you go, okay, is there another solution?
Mm-hmm.
And if you say, I'm going to take up a hobby or something that I can do easily, maybe I can get in a social group in that on Facebook or whatever, right? Not that I think you should spend too much time on the screen.
Right.
And I was going to say knitting, right? But actually knitting is not a great activity. I recently had a look at some people who do a lot of in-depth studies on the ANS. Uh-huh. And they found that a lot of people with ME actually go towards knitting.
Oh, wow.
And this anecdotal, it's not a published paper, but the measurements on the nervous system actually did show that this is actually high-stress activity.
Oh, my gosh. Wow, that makes sense, though.
Because you've got to really concentrate
very intricate
on what you're doing.
Yeah, it takes a lot of focus, yeah.
And even if you're doing it while watching TV,
right,
your nervous system has to find that hook.
Yeah, yeah. And you have to count, and you're multitasking.
Yeah. It's actually quite a draining thing.
Wow.
So many people go towards these kind of things. So check in with yourself. On a side note, what you're doing. Yeah. So a little anecdote, a little detour from my talk.
Yeah, that was a good detour. I like that. That was interesting.
Okay. Well, look. Thanks for exploring this. I mean, is there anything else you'd like to share about this topic or? your experience with changing your world?
I don't think so. I mean, we covered quite a lot, and I use a lot of this in my hypnotherapy practice with clients, and how important it is to focus on what it is you want. We're all quick to say what we don't want, right? We can come up with all our problems very easily, and we can use the don't, can't, shouldn't quickly, right? But better to try to think of the positives. This is what I want to be. This is what I imagine myself to be. Choose what that is. You can't get there if you don't know what it looks like.
Absolutely. And I think whenever you do make a shift like this, choosing your world, it's so easy to get completely focused on what you're losing. Mm-hmm. Try and focus on what you're gaining. Mm-hmm. Oh, now I've got all this space. Okay.
Yeah.
It's exciting. Maybe I'll find maybe I'll find photography in nature. Maybe I'll find some other activity.
Yeah.
And so, yes, there's discomfort, but in some way it might be the first bit of growth you've had in years, because when we're ill, we stagnate, we can't really do anything, and we feel so frustrated with that. Mm-hmm. Take some of this negative stuff out of your life, choose your new world, and you have an emptiness. That emptiness will propel you into some kind of growth, some new experiences.
So what I hear you saying is we're missing the element of trust is in there too then. Trusting in the universe or in your whatever preference, fill in the blank, right? You have to have trust.
It's not a trust. You know what? It's a fact. It's got to happen. There's no way that you can remove this focus and this mental energy in your life. Mm-hmm. When you take it out, there's going to be a vacuum. Mm-hmm. You have to fill it. Mm-hmm. Now, what you will fill it with could be negative. Mm-hmm. You could feel really sad that you've lost your connections to people and this, and they've just sitting there doing nothing. You could feel depressed, or you could feel anxious. That's one way to fill it. Mm-hmm. And that will happen to some people. Mm-hmm. But if you're focused, right, that's why we say choose your world,
right,
not lose your world, right?
Yeah.
If you lose your world, that's where you end up.
Yeah.
If you choose your world, now your focus is not on the loss. Now your focus is on where you want to go.
Right.
Therefore, when you create the vacuum, it will fill with something.
Yeah.
Something positive.
Yeah.
On that note, thanks again for joining us on the podcast, Claudia. And I hope everyone listening is going to find a way to choose their new world.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the podcast. We hope you felt supported by it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us via cfsunravel.com, and make sure that you subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to it. And you can leave a comment and a 4 or 5 star review if you feel so inclined. If you want to make sure you get your free copy of Discover Hope and get notified about all new recovery resources and interviews, including recovery interviews, subscribe to us via the website. Check out some of our other podcasts. I hope you'll join us again soon.